Hello, I'm Alaris. For 16 years, I built my family's company from the ground up, quietly, consistently, without asking for credit. And then, one evening over dinner, my father handed my reckless brother the keys to a brand new company truck and smiled like it meant nothing. He said, "Not everyone has your natural talent." That was supposed to be a compliment, but it felt like the softest slap I'd ever received. No partnership, no promotion. Just a card about humility and an old rusted truck that barely started. 1 week later, the same people who overlooked me were begging me to come back. What changed? Or was I just the only one who ever held the place together? Would you have stayed? Kenton's birthday had always been something of a spectacle, never subtle, never quiet. That year was no exception. I had just finished rearranging the chairs in the conference room to accommodate the extra guests when I realized I'd done it again. Showed up early, took care of the details, stayed invisible. It was the same room where I'd pitched 3 logistics overhauls that had kept us alive during the worst quarters. The same space I'd scrubbed by hand the night before our first ever regional contract signing. But tonight, none of that mattered. My brother walked in an hour late, wearing a new jacket he probably hadn't paid for, with that boyish grin that somehow still worked on everyone in the room but me. And like clockwork, people clapped. Some even stood. I sat at the far end of the long table. It was a seat I didn't fight for anymore. Let them have the head of the table. I knew who made this company move. Dad stood up, drink in hand, eyes on Kenton like he was looking at his own reflection 20 years ago. "This kid," he started, "has come a long way. I know it hasn't been easy, but no growth ever is." I felt my jaw tense. I stared down at the linen napkin I'd folded earlier that afternoon. "He's got heart. He's got passion," Dad continued. "And he's earned something special." That's when he pulled out the key ring. A silver company logo keychain shimmered under the room's soft lights. A new Ford truck key dangled from it like a medal. The room burst into claps before Dad even said the words. "Kenton, the new company truck is yours." That moment, sharp and surreal, cut through me faster than I could register. I kept my face still, smiled faintly. My fingers stayed wrapped around the stem of my wine glass so tightly, my knuckles paled. Kenton smirked. "Seriously?" he said, grabbing the keys, already flipping them in his hand like it was some toy. "I thought we were leasing that one." Dad laughed. "Not anymore. We figured you'd need something newer, more reliable." Image matters when you're heading into client meetings. Image. That word scratched at me. The same week, my truck had stalled 3 times, once in front of a hospital, twice while idling in the warehouse lot. But hey, at least I had natural talent, right? After the cake had been cut and Kenton soaked up every last compliment, I stood to help clean. As I passed behind Dad, he reached out and gently tugged my arm. "Hey, come here," he said, leading me toward the hallway. He looked proud, relaxed, like he had just orchestrated the perfect family moment. "You good?" "Sure," I lied. He handed me a small white envelope. "Didn't forget about you." Inside was a card, embossed, subtle gold print. I opened it, expecting maybe a gift card or a thank you bonus, something tangible. Instead, it read, "You don't need rewards. Your strength is your humility. You've always been our anchor. Love, Dad." I closed it slowly, blinked once. "Pretty words," I managed. "You know you're the one who holds this place together," he said, leaning in to hug me. "We just want Kenton to feel like he's contributing." "So the truck is motivational?" He chuckled. "He's trying, Alaris. He's not you, but he's trying." I stood there for a moment, letting the hug hang in the air longer than I wanted. I nodded. "Thanks." What I didn't say was, this wasn't about the truck. It wasn't about feeling better than Kenton. It was about the math of it all. 16 years. No equity. No credit. No room in the speech. That drive home hit differently. My truck rattled like an old coffee can someone had kicked down a gravel road. Each bump, each metallic squeal, sounded like a laugh in my face. I gripped the wheel with both hands, eyes fixed ahead even though I couldn't stop replaying Dad's smile. The applause, the absence of my name in that toast. It wasn't the first time I'd been overlooked, but it might have been the first time I really saw it. I passed through downtown Spokane. Lights from restaurants flickered past. Couples were sitting near windows, laughing over wine or burgers. It reminded me I hadn't had a night off in weeks, maybe months. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. I ignored it. Probably Kenton texting some joke about his sweet ride, or Mom telling me how much that night meant to the family. When I got home, I sat in the driver's seat longer than I meant to. The dashboard lights dimmed. The familiar blinking of check engine glowed soft red. The battery gauge dipped again. I finally grabbed my phone and unlocked it. There it was, the link I'd saved 7 months ago and ignored ever since. Operations Manager, Brighton Logistics, now hiring. I stared at it, not because I was planning to apply, not yet, but because something in me had shifted. A sliver of myself I hadn't heard from in years whispered, "They won't change. Not for you. Not ever." And I listened. That link sat on my screen like a silent dare. I didn't click it, not yet, but it stared back at me through that dimly lit dashboard like it was waiting. I shut the screen, shoved the phone into my bag, and leaned back in the seat, letting the cold hum of the engine remind me how far I hadn't come. 16 years in this business, and my greatest reward was a note about humility and an engine that coughed like a dying animal. The next morning came too soon, like it always does when sleep is poisoned by disappointment. I made my coffee, skipped breakfast, and pulled my hair back in a tight bun like armor. I didn't bother checking my messages. I already knew what they'd say. Some version of, "Wasn't Kenton great last night?" Or, "So happy to see the family all together." The office building was quiet when I arrived, just after 7. I liked it that way. Before people filled the halls with excuses and fake grins. I swiped in, past the front desk without a word, and slipped into the small conference room where today's presentation would happen. I clicked on the projector. The new dashboard was up on screen already. My dashboard. I had worked on it for months, dozens of sleepless nights optimizing routes, cutting delivery times, integrating live GPS tracking. This was the backbone of our entire quarter's efficiency. Without it, we'd fall behind, again. I skimmed the slides to make sure nothing had been changed. Visually, it looked the same, but then I saw it. In the bottom left corner of slide 2, lead strategist, Kenton Marshall. I blinked, twice, stared harder. Maybe I had misread it. Nope. His name, not mine. Not even team effort. Just him. Like he'd designed it, coded it, and sold it himself. People started to shuffle in. Some nodded at me politely, like I was a helpful intern who made great coffee. Kenton breezed in 5 minutes late, his shirt untucked under a blazer, like some tech startup dropout. He didn't even look at me as he tapped the keyboard, queued up the slides, and cleared his throat. "All right, let's walk through what I've been working on," he said. I didn't say a word. Not when he fumbled basic metrics I'd written. Not when he took credit for automations I spent a weekend perfecting. Not when Dad, sitting 2 seats away from him, nodded with pride. When the lights came back on, the room clapped like trained seals. I walked out before anyone could see my face. I didn't go back to my office. I stepped outside into the alley between our building and the bakery next door. The smell of burnt bread and sugar filled my lungs, grounding me. I pulled out my phone, not to look at that job link again, but because I needed something to hold that wasn't my pride cracking open. At lunch, Mom invited me to the house. "Just a small thing," she said. "Come by, honey. It'll be casual. I'll make your favorite." I went. Not because I wanted to, but because it was easier than explaining why I didn't. Their kitchen still smelled like lemon pledge and chicken broth. Everything in that house was the same, except me. I'd shrunk a little since last week, not in body, but in presence. Kenton showed up with Zadie, his 6-year-old daughter. She rushed to hug Grandma, then skipped over to me. "Hi, Auntie," she chirped. "Hi, Sweet Pea," I said, managing a smile. She tugged my hand toward the front window where the new truck sat parked in the driveway. "Uncle Kenton says this one's gonna be mine someday." The room laughed. Zadie beamed with pride. I blinked. My mother clutched her mug tighter but said nothing. The chicken was overcooked, the salad too wilted, and I chewed each bite like it might fight back. No one asked about the dashboard, No one noticed the blood under my fingernails from clawing at silence. Later, I stood in the kitchen alone, rinsing my plate. Mom joined me. She handed me a dish towel. "You okay?" "Sure," I said. "Zadie didn't mean anything by it. Kids repeat things." "I know." She didn't look at me when she said, "Your brother's trying." That presentation meant a lot to him. I turned, drying my hands. "Did you know my name was taken off it?" She froze, then recovered too quickly. "I'm sure it was a mistake." "Was it?" Silence. "I'm not mad he got the truck," I continued. "I'm mad that somehow everyone's decided I don't need to be seen anymore." Mom's voice softened. "You've always been strong, Alaris. Kenton, he needs encouragement. You don't. So being competent means I don't deserve acknowledgement?" She opened her mouth, closed it, patted my arm. "Let's not do this now. Just enjoy lunch." I didn't speak for the rest of the visit. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open. The dashboard file was still there. I clicked it. Opened the Properties tab. Created by A.M. Modified by A.M. Every entry, every update, mine. I stared at my name in that metadata like it was graffiti on a wall I used to own. I whispered to no one. They can erase the title, but not the truth. And truth, I was about to learn, can be its own kind of weapon. I didn't come back to argue. I came back to prepare for the next move. That night, after leaving the file open on my laptop, I made myself a sandwich and sat in silence at the kitchen counter. I chewed slowly, not because I was savoring anything, but because I was rehearsing in my head, running timelines, recalling meetings, trying to piece together how long this had been happening behind my back. The next day at the office, I stayed later than usual. I waited until the last person had packed up and the halls had emptied out, their voices fading down the stairwell. The late spring dusk had turned the windows to mirrors, and my own reflection kept catching me off guard. Tight mouth, tense jaw, tired eyes. I pulled up the shared server files to double-check the pitch deck we were sending out for a new delivery network partnership. I was organizing final slides for the client-facing proposal. We were supposed to present on Thursday, and I wanted to make sure everything was airtight. That's when I saw it. The finalized contract, already filed and signed. I hadn't been told it had gone through. Worse, my name wasn't on it. No prepared by, no reviewed by. Nothing. Just a heading. Lead negotiator, Kenton Marshall. I stared at the screen, willing the letters to change. Then I scrolled. Every page had his name. Every bullet point I had personally crafted, every schedule I had cross-checked, now carried his initials at the bottom like some twisted watermark. At first, I thought it might have been a system error. Maybe they used the wrong template, but I knew better. I clicked over to my email. Sure enough, there it was. A short message from Lacey, the admin who'd been with us for only 4 months. "Hi, Alaris. Kenton said you'd handled the prep, but that he'd be the final face on this one, per the owner's wishes. Just wanted to make sure everything aligned with their directives. Let me know if anything needs revising. L. Per the owner's wishes." Meaning Dad. He had let this happen. No, he had orchestrated it. I wasn't even angry yet, just stunned, like realizing someone switched your medicine with sugar pills. You're not dead, not hurt, but you've been betrayed in a quiet way. In a way that keeps you alive long enough to watch the damage grow. I opened the older versions of the document, digging through the drafts like a detective at a cold case board. Version 1, me. Version 2, still me. Notes in the margins, edits tracked, slides I'd built, charts I'd formatted. Kenton hadn't added a single thing. In fact, version 4 had a note from me in the comments. "Kenton still hasn't reviewed. Follow up next Monday." I took screenshots, saved the files separately, uploaded them to my personal drive with a new label, for when they deny it. Because I knew that's what would happen. They wouldn't admit to anything. They never had. Everything that happened in this family business was always just a misunderstanding, or worse, a decision made in the best interest of the company. That night, I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I walked the office slowly. The hall lights had dimmed. Most people had gone hours ago. My heels echoed as I passed the main hallway wall, the one we called the Legacy Line. It had framed photos of company milestones. The first van Dad ever bought, the warehouse lease signing, a black and white of Kenton and I as kids, holding wrenches too big for our hands. That one had always made me smile. But tonight, there was a new plaque up. Strategic Growth, Kenton's Vision. A photo of him in front of a whiteboard, sleeves rolled, pointing at a cluster of numbers I'd organized. The caption underneath praised his forward-thinking leadership in securing the company's future. I stared at it for a long time, not with jealousy, with grief, because I finally saw what this was, not favoritism, not oversight, erasure, intentional, deliberate. I left the hallway and slipped into the storage room. It still smelled like cardboard and toner. I opened the steel cabinet in the back and pulled out a binder labeled Q1 Contract Templates, 2021. My name was in those pages too. Drafts, contacts, vendor lists. I hadn't imagined my contribution. It was there, printed in black ink and timestamps, but no one would ever see it unless I forced them to look. And I was starting to think, maybe it was time to force it. I gathered the printouts I'd made, annotated versions of the pitch deck, including side-by-side comparisons of the edits Kenton never made. I clipped them together, walked toward the main conference room, and stopped at the door. The lights were still on. Kenton's jacket was hanging over a chair. Of course, he'd left it. He always did. I walked in, laid the packet in the center of the table, reached into my purse for a sticky note, wrote just 4 words. You forgot the truth. I placed it gently on top of the stack, adjusted the angle slightly, then turned off the lights. As I locked the building behind me, I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. But I did feel clear. This wasn't about respect anymore. It was about reclaiming my name. And one more came sooner than I thought. It was barely 8 a.m. when the front desk rang me. I was still nursing a half-finished coffee and mentally preparing to spend the morning reviewing inventory updates when they patched the call through. Hi, Alaris. Dispatch is reporting a delay on Route 6. Deliveries haven't left the dock, and the driver's confused by the rerouted schedule. I closed my eyes and inhaled. Where's Kenton? We've called, but no response. You're still listed as the escalation contact. Sorry. Of course I was. Without saying more, I grabbed my coat and walked briskly down to the operations floor. The smell of copier toner and stale vending machine snacks filled the hallway. By the time I stepped into the logistics hub, I had already started recalculating times in my head. Bobby, one of the senior drivers, was pacing near the door. Morning, I said, setting my coffee aside. Give me 5. I logged into the dashboard I had designed, adjusted the dispatch windows, updated the estimated route times, and resent the delivery orders to the fleet. Done, I told him. The system will ping you in 10. He nodded, slightly relieved. Thought we were going to lose that window with Pacific Coast Foods. I didn't respond. There was no point in confirming what we both knew. Later that day, I found out the contract Kenton had been managing nearly got pulled. A miscommunication in loading times had led to a $50,000 near miss. If I hadn't stepped in, it would have cost us one of our longest-standing clients. But did anyone say thank you? No. Not an email, not a nod, not even a good catch. I went back to my office, sat at my desk, and stared at the framed certificate on my wall. Outstanding Operational Excellence, 2016. The last year I'd received any formal recognition. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't storm down the hall. Instead, I opened a fresh document, titled it Final Notes, and started logging every incident they thought I'd forgotten. By evening, I had a call from Mom. Dinner's at 6:30 tonight, sweetheart. Just the family, casual. I wanted to say no, wanted to lie and say I was stuck in meetings, but something in me, curiosity, maybe spite, said yes. I arrived at the house at 6:25 sharp. The driveway was packed. Dad's SUV, Kenton's shiny new truck, and 2 extra cars I didn't recognize. Inside, the smell of baked ziti and garlic bread tried to trick me into thinking this was another warm family evening, but I'd lived in that house long enough to know nothing was ever just dinner. Vera greeted me at the door with a kiss on the cheek and a too bright smile. You look tired. I am. Everyone was already seated. Kenton had taken the seat at the end of the table, Dad's old spot. No one questioned it. He laughed loud, told a story about his daughter spilling apple juice on his laptop, and everyone howled like he was on stage. I sat quietly, buttered my bread, nodded at the right places. Then he dropped the line. So yeah, Pacific Coast Foods almost canceled, but I jumped in, fixed the routing, got them back on schedule. I lowered my fork. Actually, I said, voice even, I was the one who fixed the routing. Dispatch called me when you couldn't be reached. Silence. Short. Cold. Kenton blinked, then smirked. Oh. I thought you just double-checked the final numbers. Vera, without missing a beat, lifted her wine glass. Let's not ruin the mood. It's Kenton's night. Just like that. My mouth went dry, but I kept my voice steady. It's not about the mood, Mom. It's about the truth. She waved her hand, dismissing me like a mild draft. Sweetheart, you don't need credit for everything. You know your worth. That should be enough. That line, that damn line, it hit harder than any slap. Kenton leaned back in his chair, looking smug. We're all working toward the same goal, Al. Let's not get petty. Petty. I stood up, slow, intentional. I don't need a spotlight, but I also won't be a ghost. Nobody said a word, not Dad, not my cousin sitting next to Kenton. Not even Vera, who simply kept slicing her lasagna like I hadn't spoken at all. I left my plate half-finished, excused myself quietly, and walked toward the kitchen to rinse my hands. Vera followed. Don't do this, she said, voice low. I turned. Do what? This need for attention. You've always been strong, Alaris. Not everyone's built like you. Kenton, he's sensitive. He needs to feel seen. And I don't? I said. Because I handle things quietly? I don't get to be acknowledged? You're the backbone. That's a compliment. It's not a compliment if it means being invisible. She sighed. You always take things so personally. That's when I realized she wasn't going to get it. She wasn't going to see the slow erasure. She'd convinced herself that harmony was worth the sacrifice, even if that sacrifice was me. I left without dessert. In the car, headlights cutting across the quiet road home, I spoke out loud to no one. One more time, I whispered. Just one more. I didn't know if it was a promise or a warning. The moment I told myself one more, I hadn't realized how soon it would come knocking. It was Sunday night, almost 10 p.m., and I was standing in the laundry room folding towels when my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first. Everyone important knew I didn't pick up late on Sundays unless it was an emergency, but it kept buzzing, 3, 4 times. I finally wiped my hands, picked it up, and saw the name. Dispatch. I answered, expecting the worst. Hi, Alaris. Sorry to call. We know it's late, the young woman on the other end said, already apologetic. The warehouse is locked up for the night, and we just got word the route update for tomorrow's West Side medical supply run is incomplete. Kenton hasn't replied to emails since Friday. I stared at the open dryer like it had answers. Is my name still attached to the emergency override access? Yes, you're still listed in the internal admin table. Of course I was. I grabbed my laptop from the kitchen, logged in through the back-end portal I had built myself 3 years ago, and found exactly what I expected. The schedule was half-filled, the addresses mismatched, and there were no contact numbers uploaded for hospital security. I fixed it in under 12 minutes. After sending the final schedule to all 5 drivers, I logged out, shut my laptop slowly, and stared at the dark window. That was it. Monday morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. The sun had barely made it over the horizon, and the parking lot was mostly empty. I parked in my usual spot, farthest from the entrance, out of habit, and sat in the car for a few seconds, hands resting on the steering wheel. I didn't feel angry. I felt done. Inside, I went straight to my desk. No greetings, no coffee, no small talk. I pulled open the bottom drawer and reached for a small cardboard box I kept there, one I hadn't touched in years. I started filling it with the few personal items I hadn't already removed, a framed photo of me and our original 3-person crew from the company's first holiday season, a small cactus plant Kenton had once called your weird desk thing, and 2 pens I liked too much to leave behind. Then I opened a new Word document. It wasn't long, just a simple resignation letter. Direct, professional, no drama. At 7:43 a.m., I printed it, signed it, and walked it down the hall. Dad's office light was off. I laid the envelope neatly in the center of his desk. By the time the rest of the office was alive and buzzing, I was already back at my desk clearing files from my computer. Kenton found me just after 9. He knocked once and strolled in like he owned the place. "Morning," he said casually, holding a to-go cup with his name scribbled on the side. I didn't look up. "What do you want, Kenton?" "I heard you dropped a letter on Dad's desk this morning." I said nothing. He tilted his head like he was studying an oddity in a museum. "You're not serious." I finally glanced up. "You think I'm bluffing?" He scoffed, half laughed. "Come on, Al. You always come back." I held his gaze. "Not this time." Kenton smirked. "This is about the truck, isn't it?" I stood slowly, not in anger, just certainty. "No, this is about being used like duct tape and expected to be grateful for it. You're being dramatic. And you're being predictable." I walked past him, out of the room and down the hall. I could feel eyes watching me, but no one said a word. At noon, Dad called me into his office. I closed the door behind me, sat down, and waited. He didn't even look up from his computer. "Is this about the truck?" I almost laughed, almost. "No," I said. "This is about 16 years of being overlooked, undermined, and erased. The truck was just the ribbon on the box." He finally looked at me then. "I didn't know you were this emotional." That line hung in the air like a sour note. I nodded slowly. "You mean human? I thought you had thicker skin." "Thicker than what? Your double standards?" He exhaled and leaned back in his chair. "This is why I didn't promote you. You personalize everything." That was Twist S8 in full force, blame disguised as leadership. I smiled, not out of humor, but because I was ready for this moment. "No," I said. "I just stopped swallowing what should have never been served." He blinked. I stood. "I'm not bitter, Dad. I'm just done." There was nothing left to say. He didn't stop me. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask if there was anything he could do to keep me. And I didn't expect him to. That evening, I returned to the office one last time, after hours, when I knew no one would be around. The hallway lights were dim, casting soft shadows across the old tile floor. I walked through each department like a silent observer, letting my memory catalog every space I had improved, every process I had streamlined, every broken thing I had quietly fixed without applause. I reached my desk, typed in my admin credentials, and began systematically revoking my own access, internal system logs, emergency overrides, database credentials, GPS syncs, all of it. One by one, I unhooked the wires they had refused to acknowledge I'd ever connected. Before shutting the laptop, I paused. There was a prompt blinking on screen. "Confirm final logout?" I whispered. "Yes." Then clicked. As the screen faded to black, I took a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. This wasn't revenge, it was release. On my way out, I left a small sticky note on the back of the main server monitor. It wasn't for anyone specific, but I knew someone would see it. It read, "Good luck running a system when you don't know who built it." I stepped outside into the warm evening air, the hum of summer crickets faint in the distance. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed them anything. The first door didn't slam shut. It cracked open. 2 weeks had passed since I walked out of my father's company. 2 weeks without emails labeled urgent. 2 weeks without Kenton's chaotic schedules, Dad's passive-aggressive silence, or Mom's veiled attempts at keeping peace. And yet, here I was, standing in the middle of the Spokane Civic Center, scanning the sea of booths at the local business expo like someone who didn't know if she belonged. I had told myself I was only there to see what competitors were doing, not to get involved, not to make a statement, just observe. But as I wandered past a booth with poorly arranged pamphlets and a smoothie bar that had long since run out of ice, I heard it. Kenton's voice. "And what makes our system revolutionary is its predictive optimization algorithm, fully integrated into delivery routing, real-time adjustment, and back-end reporting. I turned toward the sound, inching closer to the edge of the crowd surrounding his table. And there it was, my dashboard, my color palette, my layout. Even the sample data still included formatting quirks I had built to bypass internal errors. The title had changed, of course. Now it read, Kenton's Operational Model. I felt the familiar throb behind my eyes. But this time, I didn't look away. I listened. A woman in the crowd raised her hand. Can this adjust live reroutes if a delivery driver gets delayed en route? Kenton hesitated. He fumbled for the remote, clicked the wrong slide, and started rambling. Something about synchronization and flexible back-end tech, neither of which he understood. My feet moved before my brain told them to. I can answer that, I said, stepping forward. Since I designed it. There was a beat of silence, then a wave of whispers. Kenton turned toward me, his face pale and tight. You what? He asked, barely above a hiss. I smiled. The algorithm, the layout, the architecture of this model. I built it before you repackaged it. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. I turned to the crowd. To answer the question, yes, it reroutes in real time, factoring delivery sequence, traffic conditions, and service window priorities. It also notifies the client if there's a significant ETA change. I didn't wait for applause, or questions, or stares. I simply walked away. Outside, I took a deep breath and let the sunlight warm my shoulders. I hadn't planned that moment. I hadn't rehearsed it. But it felt clean. Necessary. That night, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop. I didn't write a rant or call a lawyer. Instead, I created a single PDF. It was short, 5 pages. The first showed the original concept sketch with a timestamp from last year. Page 2. A screenshot of the internal build file history, all under my name. Page 3 listed the email thread approving the final specs. Pages 4 and 5. Screenshots of Kenton's version, nearly identical, just with new branding and his name replacing mine. No commentary, no accusations. I sent it from a private email account, anonymously, to the company Kenton had tried to impress. Marceline B., the CEO of a mid-size grocery delivery chain. Then I shut my laptop and made tea. 2 days passed, then 3. No reply, no fallout, nothing, until Friday night. I was pouring wine when I saw the LinkedIn notification pop up. Marceline B. viewed your profile. I took a long sip and let a small smile form. Saturday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Ms. Marshall, would you be open to a short conversation about partnership potential? Marceline. I didn't respond right away. I let it breathe, let the silence speak for me for once. Back at the company, I imagined the fallout. A junior staffer likely reported the expo scene to Vera. Kenton probably spent the day barking orders and rewriting emails, frantic to regain control. I'd seen him spiral before. He didn't handle exposure well, and I hadn't even needed to shout. On Monday, a friend from accounting forwarded me a mass email Kenton sent to the whole company. Subject: Disruption of Company Image. While we appreciate everyone's efforts at the recent Business Expo, we must remember to represent Wilson Family Logistics professionally. External interference, regardless of former affiliations, undermines our mission. I didn't finish reading. Because none of it mattered. The power wasn't in the noise anymore. It was in the receipts. What I'd sent to Marceline hadn't just exposed a lie. It showed competence, composure, and clarity. Truth doesn't always need a platform. Sometimes it just needs the right inbox. That night, I pulled out an old folder from the top shelf of my closet. Inside were files from years ago, client referrals, praise emails, improvement logs. I scanned them one by one, not out of nostalgia, but as confirmation. I'd built something real. And now, it would have my name on it. I wasn't looking to be reinstated. I was looking to be released. But now, they wanted both. When I woke up the morning after sending the letter to the board, I had nearly a dozen emails waiting. Some were quiet acknowledgments. A few were outright apologies, from employees who had watched the erasure but said nothing. And one stood out. From HR. Subject line, let's talk. Urgent. I didn't reply. Not because I was avoiding the conversation, but because I wasn't ready to hear a defense built on desperation. I knew how these things worked. When people can't control your silence, they try to manipulate your re-entry, and I wasn't theirs to manage anymore. That Friday evening, I dressed in a black sleeveless dress that fit like certainty. Simple, structured, unapologetic. The invitation had come a week earlier, a corporate charity gala hosted by Wilson Family Logistics. The kind where people wear name tags over trauma and sip wine like it makes neglect taste better. I had debated attending at all, but something in me, not revenge, not pride, told me I needed to be seen, not for them, for me. I arrived just as the cocktail hour began. The ballroom was softly lit, the clink of glasses and cautious laughter filling the space. I scanned the room quickly, familiar faces, polite nods. Then I spotted Kenton. He was at the center table, surrounded by a half-circle of donors, suppliers, and people who called him visionary because he repeated phrases from books he hadn't finished. And sitting beside him, arms folded, smile stiff, was Mark, my ex. 5 years ago, we'd tried to build something. He couldn't understand why I prioritized work. I couldn't understand why he couldn't finish anything he started. It ended with him saying, "You'll always choose spreadsheets over people." And now, here he was, at Kenton's table. "Small world," Kenton said, loudly enough to carry across the room. I met his eyes. He smiled wide, leaned in toward Mark, and whispered something that made them both laugh. Mark looked at me, raised his glass, and mouthed, "Still intense?" I didn't flinch, didn't roll my eyes. I walked to the bar, ordered sparkling water, and nodded when the bartender offered lime. Later that evening, the lights dimmed, and the projector screen flickered to life. "This year," Vera's voice said from the podium, "we celebrate the evolution of our company, its legacy and future." Photos began to roll. The first delivery van, a ribbon-cutting ceremony, Kenton shaking hands with vendors, Dad holding a shovel at the groundbreaking of our new warehouse. Faces I recognized, rooms I had organized, systems I had built. But not once did my face appear, not even in the group shots I remembered standing in. And then came the leadership timeline, a sleek, animated slide moving through years, 2008 to 2023. Names, titles, promotions. Kenton's picture enlarged over and over. Vera's quote about nurturing family growth, a closing phrase across the screen. Guided by innovation, built on family. Applause erupted. I sat in silence. No one turned to look at me, except Mom. She caught my eyes and quickly looked away. Guilt, or discomfort, maybe both. Kenton lifted his champagne. To 20 more years of growth. And that's when something snapped. Not loudly, not with anger. It was the quiet shift of understanding. That I hadn't just been excluded, I had been intentionally erased. I stood, walked out, and drove straight home. I didn't bother taking off my dress. I went straight to my desk, opened my laptop, and began compiling every document I had. Emails, memos, slide decks, strategic notes, photos with timestamps, each file dated, organized. By 1:00 a.m., I had over 60 attachments. I wrote a short, professional message and sent it to the board, BCCing Marceline, the same CEO who had once viewed my LinkedIn with quiet curiosity. Subject line: Clarification, ownership of operational legacy. I wrote, "To the board, it has come to my attention that recent internal and public materials have misrepresented key contributors to the company's strategic evolution. Attached, you will find a detailed log of project leadership history, verified documentation, and collaborative credits which reflect my role over the past 16 years. I ask for no title, no position, no correction, only that you understand I will not be erased from something I helped build with bare hands." Alaris Marshall. Then I hit send. The next morning, before I even finished my first coffee, I had 8 new messages, 4 from board members, 2 from mid-level staff who had been on teams I led, 1 from HR again, and the last, a voicemail from Dad. "I think we should talk." I didn't call back. That day, Kenton released a company-wide statement claiming technical oversight in the gala video and asserting that team achievements are more than individual spotlights. They called it a clarification. I called it too late. Some wounds never fully close. Some silences echo even after the noise is gone. But some endings, no matter how quiet, how sharp, how overdue, are necessary. It had been 3 weeks since the gala, 2 since I'd sent the letter to the board, just long enough for the dust to settle in all the places I'd left untouched, long enough for things to start unraveling on their own, like an old machine left humming long after its purpose had passed. Still warm, still ticking, but slowly beginning to break apart from the inside. I hadn't expected to hear from them again. Not really. I thought my letter would be my final word, a line drawn, firm and clear. No theatrics, no encore. But then came the text from Vera, short, formal, cold. Your father is stepping down. He'd like you at the closing ceremony. No apology, no softness, just an invitation carved from dry wood and pride, an olive branch offered without sincerity, brittle and brittle-handed. Still, I said yes, not for them, and not for reconciliation. I chose a neutral place, a small cafe on the outskirts of town that hadn't changed in 30 years. The kind of place where the booths were sticky, the coffee came in chipped brown mugs, and the waitresses knew your name, but never your order. I arrived 10 minutes early. They were already there, Vera and Kenton, seated side by side like a painting someone had straightened for symmetry, not sentiment. They looked like a polite arrangement, not a partnership, not a team, just 2 people clinging to appearances. Alaris, Vera said with a practiced nod, like I was someone she'd once heard about rather than someone she'd raised. Her tone was level, controlled, so tightly wound it sounded pleasant. Kenton didn't meet my eyes. He looked at my coat, at the space beside me, then finally mumbled, "You look busy." I sat down slowly, placing my hands in my lap. "You wanted to talk?" Vera folded her hands like she always did before rehearsed speeches. "We've been reviewing things," she said. "Kenton and I, along with your father, we believe some mistakes were made." I tilted my head slightly. "That's generous." She blinked, but didn't flinch. "We'd like to offer you a seat back at the table," she said. "Not just as an employee, as a partner." Kenton added, "Equity, title, decision-making power." The offer hung between us, heavy with old dust. "And the cleanup?" I asked. "You want me to come back and fix what's broken? Again?" Vera didn't answer right away. Her lips pressed into a line, a tight, restrained response that said more than words could. "You're not offering me power," I continued. "You're offering me guilt, wrapped in a promotion. You're asking me to carry the weight of your mistakes so you can still control the narrative." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was revealing. "I'm not angry anymore," I said quietly, but clearly. "But I'm also not coming back." Then I stood up, calm, certain. When I left the cafe, I felt nothing but certainty. No hesitation, no resentment, just the steady thrum of my own resolve. That night, I sat at my desk with a cup of herbal tea and opened my personal archives, the old Google Drives, shared folders, projects buried under layers of renaming and repurposing. I didn't rush, I just moved through the digital past like clearing out an attic. I deleted what needed deleting, archived what mattered, revoked access, cleared permissions, deactivated admin credentials and internal tools I had personally coded into the Wilson infrastructure. I didn't destroy anything. I just removed myself. Entirely. If they wanted the machine to run, they'd have to learn how to build it themselves, or watch it fall apart. By the end of the week, I heard whispers, quiet murmurs from former colleagues, clients delaying payments, contracts being reconsidered, a few employees quietly searching on LinkedIn, posting vague updates like, "Exploring new paths." By Monday, the company website was offline. "Scheduled maintenance," the banner said, but the timing spoke louder. I hadn't lifted a finger. Meanwhile, in a small office on the top floor of a building with peeling paint and honest sunlight, I was printing new business cards. Alaris Marshall, founder, Sable Ops Logistics. It wasn't a flashy firm. We didn't do viral launches or hoverboard brainstorming sessions, but it was mine. A quiet, deliberate space with white walls, living plants that didn't need too much light, and a team that understood two things: loyalty and competence. When we signed our third client, a company that had once been Wilson Family Logistics' flagship account, I didn't open champagne. I brought in warm cinnamon rolls from the bakery next door, left handwritten thank you notes at every desk, and scheduled a meeting to talk timelines and optimization goals. I didn't want fireworks, I wanted function. One afternoon, while reviewing invoices, a knock came at the door. I looked up. Marceline stood there, the CEO I had once emailed after the expo, the one who had nodded thoughtfully during my panel. She stepped into my office without ceremony. "I thought I'd stop by in person," she said with a smile. We sat, drank 2 strong coffee in mismatched mugs, and spoke like equals. No one trying to dominate, no one trying to impress. At one point, after a pause, she said softly, "You were never invisible, Alaris. You were just too valuable to be allowed out of the shadows." I didn't reply right away. I let the weight of her words settle. "I'm not interested in being the loudest voice in the room," I finally said. "I just don't want to be talked over anymore." She nodded. "That's not a demand, that's leadership." By the time she left, she'd signed us to a long-term contract, not because I'd pitched perfectly, not because of my resume, but because I had finally stepped into my own space and stayed there. A week later, I was in my office after hours, reviewing documents by the low glow of my desk lamp, when a new email arrived. From Vera. Subject: ceremony. Body: your father's retiring next Thursday. There will be a small gathering. He asked if you'd come. No pressure, no apology, no promises, just another extension. I stared at the screen for a long time. Did I want to go? Not to be seen, not to cause a scene. Maybe for closure. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out an old plaque, the one I had once hung behind my desk at Wilson. Operations Director, 2017. I ran my fingers over the engraving. The corners were chipped, the brass faded. Then, without fanfare, I set it gently in the trash, because titles mean nothing without truth. And I had finally learned how to stand in mine. I didn't go to reclaim anything. I went to see if I'd left behind something worth burying. The morning of the closing ceremony was brisk, that sharp edge of late fall in Spokane that always carried the smell of pine and endings. I pulled on a gray coat, nothing fancy, and made my way to the old Wilson Family Logistics building for the first time in nearly 2 months. The parking lot was only half full, a few familiar cars, a few I didn't recognize. The front door, once shining with pride and polish, now hung slightly crooked on its hinge, as if even the building had grown tired. Inside, the echo of my footsteps felt louder than I remembered. Reception was empty. No one at the front desk. A sign taped to the wall read, "Please proceed to conference hall. Final remarks, 10 o'clock a.m." I followed the hallway slowly, my fingers brushing the faded plaques on the wall. All the old Employee of the Quarter awards, most featuring people who had left years ago. The hallway smelled different now, like dust and cheap hand soap. Fewer lights were on, fewer people to light for, I guessed. The conference hall wasn't full, maybe 20 people total. Kenton stood near the podium, fidgeting with a stack of note cards. Vera sat off to the side, tight-lipped as ever. A young man I didn't recognize handed out programs. When he offered me one, I waved it off with a polite smile and took a seat near the back. There was no grand opening, no dramatic speech, just Kenton clearing his throat and tapping the mic. "Thank you for coming," he said, eyes flicking across the room. They landed on me for a second. No smile, no nod, and then kept moving. "As most of you know, Wilson Family Logistics will be winding down operations over the next several weeks. My father has formally retired and, given recent shifts in contracts, we've made the difficult decision to restructure." I watched him stumble through his script. He tried to look composed, but even from the back, I could see the sweat forming at his temples. The pauses in his speech weren't for effect. They were stall tactics. The truth is, he continued, we've faced some challenges. Miscommunications, leadership transitions, mistakes. That word, mistakes, hung in the air longer than the others. I scanned the room. Most faces looked uncomfortable, tired, detached, like they were already mentally in a different job, a different building, a different life. Kenton wrapped it up with a mumbled thank you and a hasty exit from the mic. No applause, just polite shuffling as people stood, shook hands, and began drifting toward the exit. I stayed seated. Vera approached me a few minutes later. She looked older than I remembered. Not in years, but in weight. Like holding everything together had taken more from her than she was willing to admit. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said quietly, slipping into the seat beside me. I wasn't either, I replied. We sat in silence for a few moments. She didn't say anything about the company, or about Kenton, or about my name being cut from 10 years of records. Instead, she reached out and gently touched my hand. I hope you're happy, she said. You look lighter. I turned to her. I'm learning how to be. She nodded, then stood. Take care of yourself, Alaris. You too, Mom. She walked away without another word. After a moment, I stood, walked once through the empty office halls, past the warehouse doors, the mailroom, the break room that always smelled like burnt popcorn, and then I left. Back at my home, the heater had already kicked on. The house was quiet, warm, and clean. My new office, tucked into the corner of the living room, had everything I needed. A sturdy desk, my laptop, a shelf lined with files. On the desk sat a card from Marceline. Simple white stock, neat handwriting. Thank you for building something that works because it's honest. We trust you, and your work shows why we should. In my inbox were 2 new contract approvals. I made tea, watered my succulents, and stepped onto the porch as the afternoon sunlight settled over the neighborhood. Across the street, a man climbed into a faded pickup truck. No custom rims, no company logo, just a good, solid machine. He drove off, engine humming like it was supposed to. I sat down in the old wicker chair I'd rescued from a yard sale, wrapped my hands around the warm mug, and let the quiet settle. This wasn't a victory lap. It was peace, and peace wasn't loud. Inside, my phone buzzed with a new message. I let it ring. I had nothing left to fix, nothing left to prove, just this moment, just this place, and maybe that was enough. They didn't lose me when I walked away, I thought. They lost me every time they refused to see me. I smiled, not wide, but real. I didn't need to win the family legacy. I became my own. Sometimes walking away isn't giving up. It's choosing yourself after everyone else has taken what they needed from you. Alaris didn't seek revenge through noise. She let absence speak louder than anger. Have you ever stayed too long in a place where your value was ignored? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about quiet strength, family betrayal, and the moments that change everything.